So, Silvia Moreno-Garcia quickly became one of the authors that I was super invested in and was really looking forward to reading more of after I read her Gods of Jade and Shadow, which is a book that I will review at some point because I really loved it. Horror is not really my thing, like, I don't really read a lot of horror, but I was willing to give it a shot because Silvia Moreno-Garcia had written it. And to be honest, now that I've read it, I have so many thoughts and I'm not exactly sure how to express them and how to review them, but I'm gonna try and make this as spoiler-free as possible because I feel like there are a ton of things that happen in this book that really need to be experienced firsthand without anyone spoiling it for you. This book is set in, I think, 1950s Mexico, and this is a more traditional time in Mexico's history. You know, I think Mexican women still didn't have the right to vote at this time, and the lead character, Noemi, is a young woman who's extremely modern and who sees possibilities for herself even though the rest of her family, especially her dad, really don't. She's expected to be beautiful and frivolous, and therefore that's what she is. But there's also this other ambitious side to her where she wants to do something with her life, but she isn't allowed to. Because, you know, good girls from like good families don't do things like that. So obviously, straight off the bat, I absolutely identify with Noemi. Not because that has been my experience in my life, like I've been very lucky and privileged to have the parents that I have, but any one of us who comes from a brown culture, we know what that feels like. The limitation of possibilities and ambitions in order to serve, you know, family expectations and societal expectations. That is a message that I think a lot of us can relate to. That said, I didn't really care for Noemi. I'm sorry. I think partly the reason why I didn't find Noemi as attractive as I feel I should have is because of the genre conventions. Now, this is obviously a Gothic horror tale, and Gothic horror is not my favorite. Mainly because the central theme of Gothic horror is the woman in peril. And I have very stringent needs and requirements when it comes to women in peril, which is entirely on me. Like, I'm not saying that this will affect your own reading of it. Reading is a very subjective affair, you know, what you fall in love with and what you don't. It's entirely up to you. And I don't want to be unfair to this book because I think it is pretty well written, and for its genre, I think it's probably very well written. So I think if you're into Gothic horror, then this might be absolutely your jam. It just wasn't for me. So obviously a lot of this book depends upon plot contrivances, you know. There's like things when they happen to Noemi that you're just like, well, why don't you just leave? Or else you're like, well, how many times does this have to happen to you before you figure out that this is highly unusual and weird? So the plot is that Noemi is sort of like in the standoff with her dad because she wants to study further, and her dad sends her up north to rescue a cousin who sent her a letter saying that, you know, she's just gotten married to this really weird family of English people who've been living in Mexico for decades, and now she finds herself trapped in their old mansion and she can't get out, and she doesn't really understand what's happening to her, but she's very scared and she's afraid that she's gonna die, and she just really needs her, you know, her flamboyant, ambitious daredevil cousin to come and help her and rescue her. And I did enjoy that part of it, you know, that Catalina basically writes to Noemi rather than anyone else in her family because she's like, yeah, that's my sister. She's got my back. When Noemi arrives at the high place, which is the name of the mansion where the English people live, it is absolutely weird. It's basically a Victorian Gothic mansion, and there's like mold all over the place, and the people in it are weird, and the vibe is immediately off. And see, this is when you would like find yourself a telephone and like call somebody back home and be like, hey, get us out of here. But obviously this is a horror tale, so she doesn't do that and she decides to just help her cousin herself. And what happens is that she's drawn deeper and deeper into the lives of this really weird English family. I keep saying that they're English because that is one of the central themes of this novel. The English identity of Catalina's in-laws is really important to them, like really pathologically so. There are a whole bunch of things that happen related to that, which obviously I can't talk about because no spoilers, but I'm just going to say that a whole bunch of them come with trigger warnings. I mean, it's gross, it's vile, it's disgusting. Garcia herself has said that, she really tapped into Mexico's history with eugenics when she was writing this novel. And that's sort of a hint about things that happen in the novel, because Catalina's in-laws are sort of really obsessed by their bloodline and how to keep it going and how to make it like the best it can be. And you can sort of read that as an allegory almost of the colonizer mind, an obsession with pure bloodlines and going to another land with its own culture and its own people, and then mining it on all sorts of different levels for precious resources that you feel can shore up the emptiness at your own heart. And you keep leeching it and you keep perverting it. And you can't even see what a monster you've become, because all you have is this terrible hunger for more and more and more. So this is where Garcia is such a good writer, like you read through all these descriptions of things that are definitely horrific and you're like, ugh. And then you come to the end of it and you start thinking about it on a broader level and you're like, oh, I see what she's trying to say. And it also talks about race a lot in a Mexican context. Like Catalina is more white passing, whereas Noemi is more darker skinned. And there's this whole thing about fertility and about stock for the bloodline. And the way brown women's bodies are used and abused and discarded. None of these things, by the way, is what I expected when I started reading this book. All of this came as a complete surprise. And maybe I'm reaching, I don't really think I am, but I think it's pretty clear in the way that she structured her novel. But I definitely wasn't thinking about all these things as I was reading it, because the things that happen in this book, I read this with my book club and literally all we could all do was just scream. But while women's bodies become the proving ground for a great deal of the horror that happens in the novel, I think this is where it makes such a difference to have a woman writing the story rather than a man, because there is such a confluence of emotions that are involved in the story. There's sisterhood and motherhood and friendship and love and desire, and it's physical and emotional and psychological need. And I'm still not sure how it all comes together as a story. Like, I don't know if I like it. I definitely know that I don't like any of the characters in the story. Even the one borderline sympathetic character that we have in the story is not somebody that I really like or would ship in any way, shape, or form. But I like how female the vibe is. It has this deep feminine energy to it that I really appreciate, because I don't see a lot of it very often. In many ways, this book reminds me of The Yellow Wallpaper, which is a short story that if you haven't read, then I highly recommend you read it. And that story is really about a woman who is suffering from PPD, and basically she's having a psychological breakdown, and you kind of see it through her own eyes, and it is something that really left a strong impression on me when I first read it. Really, really disturbing. This is like a more explicit, gross, outright horror version of that basic premise. Although this story is not about PPD, it's really about, like I said, it's about colonialism, it's about racism, it's about gender relations, it's about things that are very current and of interest to people who are reading it today. And it fits very well into the current conversation. So if you're a person who really enjoys horror, then I'm going to say that this is probably a must-read for you. If you're not, then I'm going to say that your mileage may vary, same as mine. For more videos, please hit the subscribe button.